Groceries are now considered a luxury, something you splurge on when you're feeling good. This viral Business Insider article is based on a report by McKinsey, one of the largest consulting firms in the world. The report found that millennials and Gen Z's top splurge category was not travel, dining out, personal care, apparel, or any of these other exciting categories. It was groceries.
I've gotten really into cooking and like to splurge on cheeses at the grocery store. We definitely cook a lot more than eating out and like to go to specialty grocery stores to buy different ingredients for cooking at home.
Welcome to the 21st century, where cheese is a luxury. An ingredient most known for being on cheap foods like cheeseburgers and pizza. There is even a whole thing about government cheese. But I think we can all agree that cheese isn't something most people consider a splurge. Yes, there are fancier cheeses, and yes, I know that's what you're thinking right now. But remember, cheese isn't caviar, French wine, or dry-aged steaks. We're talking about cheese, something all of us have in the fridge right now. Except for the vegans watching this, in which case you all have fake cheese in your fridge because even vegans want to eat cheese. If you think this sounds a little frightening, don't worry. It gets so much worse. Business Insider had their own idea for what splurging on groceries means. They singled out buying fancy drinks and sodas. And no, they're not talking about wine, beer, or liquor. One example Business Insider gave was Liquid Death. For those who don't know, Liquid Death is a brand of canned water. The gimmick is that it looks like an energy drink, but it's water. An 8-pack on Amazon costs a little less than $12. That's just under $1.50 a can. For Generation Z and Millennials, splurging is spending $1.50 on a can of water. It's moments like these that make me wonder whether everything is really okay. Is this not a sign that something is very wrong with the United States? The idea of splurging is treating yourself to a can of water. That's terrifying. What have the phrase "let them eat cake" is commonly attributed to Marie Antoinette. The story goes that when Antoinette, the Queen of France, found out that the French were starving and unable to afford bread, she told them to just eat cake. Cake, obviously being more expensive than bread, isn't a viable solution to mass starvation. It's like telling a homeless person that they should go to a hotel. There's tons of rooms available there. Easy peasy. Now this is just a story. Marie Antoinette never spoke those words. But this story does correctly capture how the French felt about her. By the time of the French Revolution, they hated her with every fiber of their French bodies. Rumors and gossip swirled around Antoinette, each whisper further cementing her as the embodiment of aristocratic greed. A disconnected elite who doesn't understand nor cares about the struggles of the average Frenchman. During her reign, France increasingly became a disaster. France was struggling to pay off debts from funding multiple wars. This burden couldn't be relieved because the aristocrats refused to surrender their tax privileges. Then add in a series of bad harvests, which drove up the price of bread. Give this all a stir and oh look, you've made a French Revolution. But Antoinette wasn't the main reason for any of this. Yes, she was the queen, but she was just one small head on a many-headed hydra. How much blame does she really deserve? Paul Krugman is a Nobel Prize-winning economist and a regular op-ed columnist for the New York Times. He is also a fervent believer that the United States' economic situation is fantastic. According to him, the United States isn't experiencing an economic crisis. We are actually in the midst of a Vibecession. More often than not, anyone who argues that we are in a Vibecession in which public perceptions are at odds with economic reality gets tagged as an elitist, out of touch with the people's real-life experience. Well said, those angry populist fools are preventing us from talking about how great everything is. If you speak the truth, you are called an elitist scumbag. But the numbers never lie. Truth will prevail. There is no economic problem here. Now, Krugman isn't wrong, at least not at first glance. When looking at the past few years, things appear to be getting better. Unemployment is near record lows. Inflation is cooling off from the COVID-19 stimulus. The US economy is growing faster than many of its peers. But we have articles discussing the luxury of water and cheese. If the short-term economic situation looks good, but everyone's current economic situation is dystopian, then something even more problematic is occurring. We can't just look away and ignore the problem. Something is... Thomas Cole was one of America's greatest landscape painters. Surprisingly, his magnus opus was not a decadent landscape painting, nor was it a single painting. The Course of Empire is a series of 5 paintings depicting the rise and fall of a fictional empire. Each of the 5 paintings depicts one of the 5 stages of an empire's life. The first painting is the savage state. It depicts the very beginnings of human civilization. Nature is the dominant force, covering the majority of the canvas. In some areas, nature offers bright blue skies and warm sunlight. In others, nature is terrifying, offering dark clouds and dangerous shadows. The cliff in the background is a towering landmark, a monument to the sheer overwhelming power of nature. It's protected by dark waters and a shroud of clouds. It's not hard to imagine the awe humanity must feel when looking up at it. Thomas Cole depicts nature as neither good nor bad. Nature is immense, uncontrollable, and simply beyond humanity's ability to tame. Humans carve out their meager existence by hunting and gathering within the vast untamed wilderness. A man chases after a deer that he successfully shot with an arrow. A small village with basic teepee-like structures captures the limited technology people have. Man is primitive, doing their best to survive in a world far greater than themselves. But lurking here is the possibility of change. The fire at the heart of the village bellows smoke. Man can also create light and shadow. There is so much more ahead. Credit card debt is at an all-time high, with Americans owing over $1.1 trillion. That is an absurd amount of debt, especially with the average percent rate being over 21%. If a person can't pay off their debt in a year, it's as if the good or service costs an additional 21%, not even factoring in compound interest. Carrying a balance on a credit card should therefore be the ultimate last resort, given how toxic it is. It's like financial morphine. The debt takes away the pain and hopefully gives you a chance to heal. The question is whether the painkiller will give you the time you need to escape, or will the condition remain? And now you've also got a morphine addiction, which makes the situation so much worse. Only people in the most dire situations would accept carrying credit card debt. Accept might not be the right word. Forced to take is more appropriate. The choice is likely between your life falling apart or you delay a horrific outcome and you get a chance to pray for relief. These people are the ones for whom society has failed. Nearly 50% of Americans carry credit card debt month to month. We didn't get here because of COVID-19 or inflation. We didn't get here because of a short-term event. Building up over $1 trillion in credit card debt that burdens millions of Americans was a process that took decades. Put another way, it took decades to drive the average citizen into the ground. Every day, people are just trying to survive or deal with emergencies life throws their way. And every day, that debt keeps on growing without any relief in sight. It makes you wonder what will happen when everything breaks.
If you're making $20 an hour to work at a fast food restaurant, right? Is that 6 figures?
Thomas Cole's second painting in the Course of Empire is the pastoral state. Long gone are the days of eking out a meager existence within nature. Humanity's technology has progressed enough to conquer the wilderness. The teepee-like structures of the savage state are replaced by basic housing. Wooden boats offer the possibilities of exploration, trade, and expansion. Hunting is being replaced by herding. The overwhelming shadows and tangled forest has been replaced by bright sun and simple grass. The dark forest has been conquered by the axe. Nature pays the price for such progress. The prominent stump with its frayed top shows that Thomas Cole thought this was an expensive price. The peacefulness and sun shows that he believed progress was valuable, but to a point. One fascinating part about this piece is how Cole uses light and shadow to share his feelings about certain activities. In the sunlight, people dance and listen to a musician playing music. A boy creates art under the watchful eyes of his mother. A herder carefully tends to his sheep. But it's not just people in the light. The beautiful trees, the incredible mountain, and the stunning cliff all enjoy the sweet sunlight. Thomas Cole clearly finds a sense of harmony between nature and people, even with the price of tree stumps. But there is danger in the shadows. One person who sits in a mix of light and shadow is the scholar. In the dirt, mathematics is being developed. Geometry is literally taking shape. But with the learning comes a sense of danger. What will it bring? But it is not the scholar that Cole worries most about. In the darkest portion of the painting is the soldier, the promise of future violence in a single person. His spear is not for hunting, it's for harming other people. The wheel of progress has begun to turn. The pastoral state will not last forever. Antoinette was simply a face on a larger problem. It is true that she spent lavishly, but she was just one small piece of a large financial mess. But it didn't stop the French from calling her Madame Deficit. She did try to repair her reputation. One famous example of Antoinette trying to restore her image is the painting called Marie Antoinette and Her Children. The painting was first exhibited in 1787, a few years before the French Revolution. While the painting may seem glamorous, it's actually a far more modest depiction of Antoinette than normal. Notice her lack of jewelry. In the corner of the painting is an impressive jewelry cabinet. Instead of it being on display, it is in the shadows and is closed. The purpose of the painting is to depict Antoinette as a simple queen who will carry on the dynasty through her children, who are far more valuable than anything else, including jewels. But ultimately, all of this was a little too. The consummation of the empire is stunning. Carefully carved statues and columns decorate the city. The wooden buildings have been replaced by stone. The sea is covered in ships. The cliff is covered in buildings. The greenery has been reduced to mere decoration. There are pockets of well-maintained forests that serve simply to improve the lives of the people. It is not coexistence, but rather is one-sided domination. Even the cliff that loomed so powerfully has been reduced to real estate. Nature has been conquered. A parade is taking place. An emperor draped in stunning red clothing rides in a chariot. A laurel sits gently on his head, much like the Romans of old. This empire has reached distant lands, with non-white people appearing in this civilization for the first time. There is even an elephant. Citizens line the streets, watching the parade with excitement. But all is not truly cheerful. Soldiers are essential to the civilization's prosperity. They are all over the painting. Tucked near the corner of the painting is another painting on its side. This may be a stolen painting, the result of conquest in a distant land. This parade may not simply be a celebration, but a military parade similar to that of a Roman triumph. This empire's wealth is likely built on the conquest of other people. Further supporting this idea is what occurs in the shadows of the parade. A bully is sinking another kid's ship. Violence literally lurks just out of sight of the splendor. Also lurking in the shadow is a scholar. He is engrossed in reading, ignoring the opulent parade that has captivated the population. Instead of celebrating, there is a look of contemplation on his face. It's as if he is aware that something is wrong. Now is not the time to be celebrating. Rather, we must be working hard to avoid the oncoming crisis. The Federal Reserve tracks the distribution of wealth between different wealth groups in America. This is the distribution of wealth in the third quarter of 1989, the earliest data available from the Federal Reserve. It's a rather somber picture. Over half of America is sharing less than 5% of the wealth. The top 1% of America has over 20% of the wealth. The reward for being on top in America is incredibly unbalanced. While some inequality is valuable in society as reward for producing more, there is a point where that reward is excessive. I don't think anyone can look at these numbers and feel like everything is fine. Everything isn't fine. This all feels like a house of cards. But the wealth distribution in 1989 looks benevolent compared to where we are today. The newest data is from the fourth quarter of 2023. The top 1% has over 30% of the wealth in society. This gain is at the expense of the bottom 90%. The current distribution is particularly disastrous for the bottom 50%, whose share of wealth went down from 3.5% to 2.5%, a drop of nearly 30%. The Steelman argument against this situation is while the distribution of wealth is becoming increasingly unequal, the pie overall is growing. The USA's GDP per capita has steadily increased over time, meaning people are producing more goods and services every year. There is simply more prosperity to go around. Yes, the distribution is growing unequally, but the tide is raising all ships. The easiest way to prove this is looking at the United States' poverty rate. As you can see, it's rapidly dropping as the years pass. The poorest Americans are enjoying more resources, and the United States is on track to be done with poverty forever. Oh wait, it's not rapidly dropping. It's actually pretty stagnant.
Okay, Boeing's going higher. I think that this is their year. Last year, they had supply chain problems, had a couple of snafus with some planes. Now it seems to be clear sailing. I even think there are going to be some Chinese orders. There's going to be back order, and they're going to make a lot of money per plane. Buy the stock of Boeing.
Thomas Cole's destruction is a brutal painting. The sun is covered by the smoke of a civilization being burned to the ground. War has come to the heart of the empire. It's unknown whether this is due to invaders or a full-blown civil war. I suppose it doesn't matter. This is the end. The prosperity we saw before was not the climax of civilization. This moment is. The moment where it all falls apart, the end is nigh. A massive statue of a powerful warrior lays in ruin, its head lying shattered on the ground. A woman bearing a red cloak similar to that of the emperor faces a brutal choice, ultimately choosing to plunge to her death. Where war brought prosperity, it now brings destruction. There is a notable absence of nature. Not even a potted plant is present. Nature has no part in this. What we are witnessing is strictly human. In the bottom of the painting is the scholar. He's dead, but is somehow still deep in thought. You can't help but feel that he must be thinking about whether this was all inevitable. Did this really have to happen? Whether for every rise, there must be a Two of the most straightforward paths to building wealth in the United States is through education and buying a home. Getting a degree in a lucrative field is one of the best ways to climb the ladder. Home ownership is how you avoid giving all your money to a rich landlord and ultimately get to own your own home. However, these paths are becoming increasingly disastrous. College is expensive. Americans have over $1.7 trillion in student loans. And remember, these are the poorest Americans, the ones who can't afford college outright. Now, to be fair, these are fortunate poor Americans, if that makes sense. There are many people who will never go to college and have the opportunity to get a lucrative degree. Now, even with their college degree, the student loans will hold all these poor people back from climbing the wealth ladder in society. Housing is also a disaster. In the United States, buying a home is becoming increasingly expensive. The price-to-income ratio is the difference between the median sales price of a home and the median household income. The lower the ratio, the easier it is to buy a home. In 1985, the ratio was 3.5, meaning homes cost a little more than 3 times the median household income. Now the ratio is 5.8. That's over 50% more expensive relative to income. You would think that as society develops, housing should get cheaper. More efficient building materials and better designs should make it easy for people to buy a home. And yet, we see the opposite happening. The more difficult it becomes to build wealth in the United States, the less social mobility will take place. The system will become increasingly rigid, with each person's class dependent on birth. I worry about this direction. I'm not sure it's...
According to new federal data, a record number of people are now unhoused, more than 653,000, a 12% population increase since last year.
Desolation is one of the single most heartbreaking paintings ever painted. As a standalone piece, it's rather beautiful. Nature is creeping over some old ruins. It's serene and relaxing. But you know the truth. You know what was here before. You've seen the rise and fall of man. You've seen the hunters in the forest, the herders and their sheep, the emperor's parade, and the horrific battle. Over the course of 4 paintings, you have witnessed the stages of humanity. You've seen humans at their peak, and the climax of their destruction. And with that context, desolation is truly remarkable. These are more than just ruins. We are witnessing a graveyard, a tomb of civilization, a place where humanity created greatness, thought itself, and ultimately lost it all. There are no people in this painting. There is no emperor, no soldier, no scholar, no herdsman. There isn't even a hunter, because there is no one. It is a painting that forces you to think a forbidden thought, because we do not think about what happens to everything we leave behind after humanity is gone for good. After everything we built has fallen apart, our buildings, discovery, and history all serve no purpose because there are no people. There is more than just bleakness though. There is also beauty. Nature has returned. The vines use the abandoned columns to climb upwards. It's almost the reverse of how humanity built along the cliff. A bird has built a nest on top of a column. As time passes, even the ruins will crumble away. Nature will slowly return to the savage state, though this time without humanity. Instead of the sun, the moon is rising in the background. The sun has set on humanity, and everything is returning to how it once was. Thomas Cole is portraying a bleak future. But there are still questions that remain unanswered. Was this avoidable? Was there a way to escape this fate? And what could be the reason behind this destruction?
As the pandemic spread around the globe, CO2 emissions did fall as countries went into lockdowns. The falls in emissions have been bigger than in any past economic slowdown, including during the Second World War.
What is the largest grocery store in the United States? Is it Kroger due to all the other grocery stores it owns? Is it the beloved Costco? What about Amazon? It's actually Walmart, and it's not even close. Walmart's market share is more than Costco, Kroger, Sam's Club, and Publix combined. What makes this even more overwhelming is that Walmart owns Sam's Club, meaning their dominance in the grocery sector is even greater than at first glance. Walmart is supposed to be the store where people go to buy everything at the lowest possible price. If you need school supplies for your kids and money is tight, you go to Walmart. If you need to pick up a birthday present and money is tight, you go to Walmart. It's not a place for luxury goods. It's a place where you go to get what you need at rock bottom prices. Groceries suit Walmart well. Even if you're tight on money, you need to eat. You probably aren't worried as much about what you're going to eat. You are hungry and you're tight on money. You just need food. So how much of their business is groceries? Is it 10%? 20%? How big is it? It's nearly 60%. Let that sink in for a moment. Nearly 60% of Walmart's revenue is from groceries. Walmart has evolved from a store that sells everything into a grocery store that also sells some other stuff. People are desperate for cheap food. They need to eat and they don't have money.
Some of the things that we're doing is first messaging. We got to reach the consumer where they are. So we're advertising about cereal for dinner. If you think about the cost of cereal for a family versus what they might otherwise do, that's going to be much more affordable.
Thomas Couture was a French painter most known for his massive painting, The Romans in Their Decadence. Also known as The Orgy, the painting depicts Romans after a night of partying. The Romans are lazily strewn about, many still missing their clothes after a night of fun. The sun is already up and yet the Romans lounge. Partying can be fun, at least to a point. When someone is partying, they aren't being responsible. This is most apparent in college, when people procrastinate their studying in exchange for an exciting, fun-filled night. But as we get older, we all party less. We take on responsibility, often because we need money. As we seek to improve our own lives, ideally, we also improve our country by creating useful goods and services. But what if you never stopped partying? What if you have so much money you don't need to work? You are an upper-class citizen and you're doing just fine. Why work when you can just party? Couture clearly hated this idea. Around the Romans are statues depicting greater men. Upright and proud, these are the men who helped define Rome. Even their nudity is depicted as a sign of greatness instead of a product of indulgence. Thomas Couture's painting is more than just a masterpiece. Painted in 1847, The Romans in Their Decadence was a critique of the current French monarchy. It's as if the current monarchy did not learn from the French Revolution nearly 6 decades ago. Couture did not have to wait long for a change. The painting debuted in 1847. France's July monarchy was overthrown in 1848. These long-term trends have successfully left most Americans in a state of financial peril. The majority of Americans would have to borrow money to deal with an $1,000 emergency. 2/3 of US adults worry that if they lose their household income tomorrow, they wouldn't have enough savings to cover a single month's living expenses. With many Americans on the economic edge, it's no wonder that people are feeling grim about the economy. Millions of Americans are moments away from ruin for themselves and their family. The question is, what will happen next? Antoinette was led to the guillotine on September 21st, 1792. As she walked towards her death, Antoinette accidentally stepped on her executioner's shoe. Antoinette's last words were an apology for this mistake. "Pardon me, sir, I did not do it on purpose." Moments later, she would die. Antoinette was only 37 years old. It begs the question whether her fate was sealed from the beginning. There were certainly different decisions that she could have made along the way. She could have spent less luxuriously from the beginning, as her mother warned. Maybe she should have spent more time studying politics. But even if Antoinette had been much wiser, would anything really have changed? She was the scapegoat of a much larger problem. The nameless aristocrats all played a huge role in this disaster, becoming completely disconnected from the pains of the everyday man. The problem wasn't a single person. The problem was a disconnected upper class that had become so distant from everything else. Even if a wiser queen was present, and let's say this queen managed to rein in the elite, would that really solve the problem? Or would this simply be delaying the inevitable? Will those in power eventually disconnect from society, prioritizing their leisure over all of us, and ultimately destroy the very society they rule? Is this actually up to chance, or is it merely a cycle that continues over and over, every rise leading to a fall and ultimately desolation?